Hey, I just want to thank everyone for joining today. Again, I am Michael Lieberman. I'm the Food and Beverage Practice Leader at FOA & Son Insurance Brokers. And this is episode 3 of Food for Thought, a monthly webcast where we tackle a different risk management topic on each episode. We just finished up the Thanksgiving holiday a couple weeks back, and chances are that you and your family, you probably enjoyed some type of food or beverage item that was the product of a co-manufacturer, also known as a co-man, a co-packer, or perhaps it was even a tolling operation. And if you don't know the differences between those categories, you're in for a treat. You're going to learn something new today. Many emerging food brands, in addition to well-established brands, they align with co-manufacturers or co-packers. But what I have found is that they overlook some critical operational risks, creating an unsteady foundation on which they build or attempt to build their business. So today we are going to tackle this, and we are tackling this with an expert and a dear friend, Melissa Facchina. Melissa, are you there?
I'm here. Thanks for having me.
All right, Melissa, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a real pleasure to have you on. You are the owner, the founder, and the CEO of Siddhi Ops, the outsourced operations for the emerging food and beverage industry. So where are you calling in from today? I wish we could do this together, Melissa. COVID, we can't. But where are you joining us from today?
It's true. I'm one of those sad New Yorkers who fled the city during COVID. And so my family and I are bunkering down in the Catskills, not too far from where Woodstock originally was. So calling in from the woods, and hope my signal lasts as a result of it.
I hope so too. I'm not too far outside of Manhattan right now. I haven't seen Manhattan in quite a few months, but I'm doing this from my home office in Westchester County, New York. But look, really happy to have you on, especially considering that you and your team at Siddhi Ops, you oversee some ridiculous number of product launches every year. I don't know, 80 plus product launches every year. So I was really thrilled that you agreed to join us today, and that you can share your experience on how to align with the right co-man, and helping brands de-risk as much as possible as they grow. So for the audience today, just the other day, Melissa and I, we recorded our discussion, and we'll transition into that discussion shortly. But after the talk, I would suggest, please stay tuned. Melissa and I, we're going to stay on for a live Q&A. Questions, if you have them, can be typed into the Q&A tool on Zoom. I'm not quite sure how that operates on Facebook Live, but we will be monitoring Facebook Live as well. And Patty Devine, she is here with us today. Say hello, Patty.
Hello, everybody.
All right, there's Patty. Patty will be joining us at the end. She'll be moderating the Q&A. And as always, Patty, I just want to thank you for all the work that you have done to bring this production to life. So thank you, Patty Devine.
It's my pleasure, Michael. Thank you.
So another reason to stay tuned for the Q&A is that we'll be giving away some product to 2 lucky viewers. We have 2 great emerging food brands who are helping us out today with this gift. So stay tuned, and 2 lucky viewers will receive some awesome product. And we'll also be joined by Sal Fazzolari. Sal, are you here today? Say hello.
I am. Hello. Happy to be here.
All right. So Sal helped us with a special gift for Melissa. You'll see that during the presentation today. And Sal's going to join us for the Q&A at the end as well. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy episode 3 of Food for Thought. According to the 2017 State of the Specialty Food Industry, a publication put out by the Specialty Foods Association, 1/3 of all food brands surveyed do not own their own plant. The use of co-manufacturers, also known as co-mans, has only increased over the past few years as capital has poured into the emerging food and beverage space. While the right co-manufacturing relationship will allow brands to focus on sales and marketing, the wrong relationship can quickly lead to disaster. How do you choose the right co-man for the job? How to de-risk while growing your brand, and how to set a solid foundation for the growth of your business. I'm Michael Lieberman, Food and Beverage Practice Leader at FOA & Son Insurance Brokers, and this is Food for Thought. Special thanks to Greg Siewitz of Magic Spoon and Greg Struck of Noops, two emerging food brands who have a special message for our guest today. In addition, for our live viewers, stay tuned for our live Q&A for a chance to win some wonderful products from these two powerhouse brands. I'm so excited to have my good friend Melissa Facchina on the show today. A true food industry veteran with 25 plus years of experience, Melissa is the founder, owner, chief executive officer of Siddhi Ops, the premier outsourced operations firm to the emerging brands community in the food and beverage space. Melissa is also the co-founder and general partner of Siddhi Capital. Siddhi Ops is a strategic partner to Siddhi Capital, leveraging its core operational and strategic expertise for several of Siddhi Capital's portfolio companies. Since founding Siddhi Ops more than 6 years ago, Melissa and her team have worked with hundreds of clients and has successfully negotiated thousands of contracts across the food and beverage value chain. Hey, Melissa, how you doing?
Awesome. How are you?
I'm awesome. So grateful to have you on Food for Thought.
No, man, thank you so much.
No, thank you. Thank you. So look, I know we want to jump into this topic of co-manufacturing, also known as co-mans, but I would be remiss if I did not get you to give me and the audience at least a Cliff Notes version of your upbringing in the food and beverage business. And maybe during that story, if you could provide us some insight into some of the gaps that you recognize, some of the value gaps that you recognize in the food and beverage business, where eventually Siddhi Ops was born. So Could you give us a little background?
For sure, you make a bio and an introduction now very difficult by tacking in those requests. So I'm 37 and have oddly found a way to spend 25 years in the food space. I got my first job at 11 years old, hand palletizing what was perceived to be very heavy orange juice cartons. My father had an opportunity to buy some bankrupt fluid milk dairies in the Northeast and ultimately converted them to the country's largest privately held juice manufacturing business. So at 11, I was pulling juice cartons off, stacking them into corrugated boxes and palletizing them. And had a really awesome experience watching the evolution of manual to semi-automatic to fully automatic to state-of-the-art. And this amazing opportunity of what it meant to be a brand and support a branded business, what it meant to be a co-manufacturing partner or a co-packer, and we could talk about what those differences are later, and then what it meant to be a private label manufacturer, because all three of those things are different. They pose different risks, they pose different rewards, they pose different margin opportunities. But I think more importantly, my upbringing gave me a love of operations, a love of commercialization, but a real healthy respect that unless you could safely, effectively produce volume at mass scale, that it didn't really matter if people were excited about your product. It didn't matter if you got sales orders, didn't matter if everyone was talking about it. If you couldn't make it and if you couldn't get it into consumers' hands, you had a problem. And so I married kind of that love of manufacturing with the love of nutrition. And I felt robbed, frankly, of being able to provide the world with nutrient-dense foods. Juice for me just doesn't fall on that list. I don't want to drink it. I don't want my kids to drink it. Sounds very odd to say that. But it's just not on my priority list. And so, a decade ago or so, there were a ton of up and coming entrepreneurs. There still are tons of them, almost 2,100 new a year. But they were coming to market with better quality foods, more nutrient dense, natural, organic, non-GMO, you name it. There's a ton of classifiers now. And they didn't know how to make their product. They didn't know what it meant to work with third-party manufacturers. They didn't know what it meant to get from small batch to scale. Or for crying out loud, negotiate the proper terms for themselves with their manufacturing partner or get any leverage. And so those are the initial gaps I saw that I wanted to fill, and that my personal skill set, kind of leverage itself toward. But beyond that, I then saw that great advice didn't mean anything if the business couldn't execute on it. And so now I had to solve the problem for operational execution, which is essentially how City Ops grew from me as an independent, advisor consultant into being an execution firm and people who could actually do these operational tasks and do them correctly.
Okay, so you mentioned that there's all these entrepreneurs out there with great ideas. And obviously, you've had tremendous growth over the past 6 years of running City Ops. At any given time, how many brands are you now working with annually or what have you? How many brands is City Ops operating, and how many folks are on your team now?
Yeah, so the business shifted, as I suggested, from being an advisor, which allowed for, frankly, a ton of brands to come through our door. I think we've had about 300 to date now, which is extensive. We manage or build the back end of about 20 to 25 simultaneously now. So obviously the amount we can deal with at once has reduced. If we're going to do a good job and manage the day-to-day operations of their business. Our team sits anywhere between 12 and 15, depending upon, how much we need to flex in. And frankly, pre-COVID, just like everybody else in this industry, have had impact. So pre-COVID, we were growing massively and hiring 2 to 3 people a month. Post-COVID, we had to get really smart about what our clients wanted, what they needed, run thin and lean ourselves. And turn into a real operating machine, sort of practice what we preach. So we took our head count down a little bit intentionally.
I'd like to transition into the focus of our conversation, which is de-risking co-manufacturing relationships. Many of these brands that you're speaking of, that you work with, they have not invested capital dollars into creating food facilities and running food production lines. They offload that responsibility to, and as you mentioned previously, there's a few categories, right? You have co-packers, you have co-manufacturers. Can you bring us through just some of those categories and explain the differences? Because we may have people watching this who, they have a great idea in their mind, right? They want to get a product to market, but they're going to be faced with, how to get that done. So if you could just kind of bring us through what are these different categories and what are the differences?
Yeah, first of all, everyone starts somewhere, right? Unless you've gone out and raised $100 million and you've got a whole facility of, product formulators and can skip the line, everyone's starting in their kitchen. Everyone's starting at the farmer's market, so to speak. And generally the first stage of that is a commercial kitchen. What is that? You're going to essentially a place where you're renting a spot in a traditional kitchen environment. They've got ovens and sinks and stovetops and pots. Maybe they've got large scale blenders, right? Or smokers or, things that would be in a traditional restaurant style kitchen. You move from there to what I think erroneously gets called co-packing all the time. And so that's where the lingo and the differences get a little tricky. There's co-packing, there's co-manufacturing, and there's tolling, essentially. Co-packing is pretty much what it sounds like. You're getting raw materials or ingredients in, you're not changing them. Maybe you're mixing them together. A good example of that would be like dried fruit and nuts, and you put them together and now you have a trail mix. So the person who gets the nuts and fruits in and puts them in a bag, and then that bag gets sent out, that's a co-packer. They're not changing any of the structure of the materials. A co-manufacturer, and there are various forms, right? The co-manufacturer can purchase your raw materials. You can purchase your own raw materials. They can purchase packaging. You can purchase packaging. There's many ways to look at how to navigate the relationship, but essentially they're getting in raw materials. They're putting them through a process, often a process that is heat treated or has a kill step. You are changing the form of that, and you're getting a finished good out that looks totally different. So in that case, let's stick with our plant-based, analogy here and talk about the, Beyond Burger. They get all these inputs. Whatever process they use to make it comes out as a patty. And now all of a sudden that was co-manufactured. A tolling arrangement is often, often associated with beverage or HPP, where you get a finished good, a process is applied to it, and now you have the same finished good that comes out. You can also use tolling just for bagging, right? You have a powder, you're going to put powder in a bag. All you're doing is moving powder from a bulk pack into a bag, and now you're effectively paying for labor and overhead.
So when I'm dealing with the majority of my clients and I'm talking to them about risk management, talking about insurance products that are needed, I often get, I don't need that. It's never happened to me. For those watching here, I think it would be very helpful to hear a horror story if you have one. If you have any good, everyone likes a good horror flick, but I do find that this is a good way for emerging food and beverage brands to learn what maybe it hasn't happened to them, but it happened to someone else, in this world of food and beverage. So what have you experienced a bad situation? What was the brand exposure?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a scenario you can run through?
Yeah. I mean, look, unfortunately, there are several because these things happen. And by the way, I pitch insurance services almost just as much as you do, being an operator, and also hear the same thing. And I'm sometimes in a position, by the way, as an investor or brand owner, saying, I'm going to take the risk on not getting that insurance coverage right now, knowing what the exposure is for not taking it, but knowing that I have to trigger it at a certain point. And so there are risk-benefit analysis that you can do to understand when the right time to trigger is. By the way, I've always found you exceptionally honest about when the right time is to pull those triggers. It's why we work together.
Thank you.
Part of what set me off really on finding a good relationship with you was we had a client, I can't remember the exact revenue. I'd like to say it was just under 3 million. As a yogurt brand, and had a co-manufacturing partner who makes yogurt, lots of brands of yogurt, had a fire in their facility, and the facility burnt down, or at least most of it. That certainly the line that made the product couldn't run anymore. There was no co-manufacturing arrangement, no agreement, no really insurance coverage where that co-manufacturer was responsible for any of the lost business, for first of all, the inventory available. Second, the actual sales that were lost in the 9 to 12 months that this brand couldn't find another co-man partner. Because it's not that easy. You can't just go turn one on tomorrow unless you've already had a backup assessed and ready to go. They went from a $3 million company to $100,000 in a year. And had to change and restructure their whole company. Today, frankly, I don't think they're around anymore. And they had one of the best products on the market then. One of my favorite to talk about, and I say favorite because I think it covers so many things, is how does your inventory get protected? How does it get protected on the floor of a co-man? How does it get protected when you move it to a warehouse? How does it get protected when you buy the raw material and move it to wherever you're moving it to? There are so many exposures. And I think people don't realize that you don't have coverage for any of that.
Yeah.
And so you have to specifically call it out.
And I think that's one thing that you and I and the other folks at Foe & Sons, food and beverage practice that we work on together. We uncover these gaps, right?
Yeah.
Exposure gaps. And especially when you're dealing with a brand who's hiring a co-manufacturer, they have this mindset of, I don't handle the product. Right? It's in the co-manufacturer's possession. If anything happens to my product, my raw materials, my finished goods, the co-manufacturer is going to take care of it. And that's the furthest thing from the truth, right? And
most of these co-mans aren't insured the right way anyway.
Correct. And again, that's something I know that you spend a lot of time on in asking those questions of the co-mans that you're working with. Hey, what type of insurance do you have? And how is it going to benefit our brands if something were to happen, right? What are 3 things that Siddhi does to de-risk?
Negotiation. There's negotiation with co-mans, there's negotiation with suppliers, there's negotiation with, warehouses or 3PL partners. And so all of those things, first time at bat, it's difficult to get the spot you want. When you've got people who've been at bat many times before, and again, know the levers to pull, you generally end up in a better spot. Two, we're talking about a portfolio between both city organizations, about 75 companies. That's a lot of businesses that we now have the ability to say, generally speaking, you get more than one brand when you work with us. So the partners on the other side have a lot more incentive to be supportive. The second, because we're online, we'll talk about it, is we've got partners that we go to pretty much exclusively for helping us de-risk businesses. In my mind, operations is not just about execution of operating, it's pairing it with insurance, with legal, and with accounting. And if you can't pull all of those things together to build a secure back end, you've got a challenge. For me, we've picked the partners we know they can deliver on those pillars so that we can deliver on the fourth. And that together, right, supports a really secure business. I think the last is probably a real generality, which is we went out and hired basically every level of operator out of brands that have built, scaled, and exited. Some of the best, most well-known brands in the space, some of the biggest conglomerates in the space. And we put them all underneath the Siddhi umbrella so that you're not just getting one area of expertise. We see around corners and see opportunities or pitfalls that other people don't see. So we can essentially divert around them. Does that mean that we're perfect and we don't hit potholes? No, we hit potholes all the time. We just don't hit them as hard, as direct, or blow out our tire because of it.
All right, so finally, we here at FOA and Son, we wanted to come up with a way to thank you for not only being a friend and a great partner, but being a guest here on Food for Thought. I know personally, Melissa, you put your heart and your soul into everything that you do when it comes to all of the brands that you work with. I don't think you knew that you were appearing on the insurance equivalent of This Is Your Life, but we actually have a couple of surprise guests who have recorded special messages just for you. These two people who head up emerging food and beverage brands, or actually in this case, food brands. They work closely with the City Ops team. They work closely with you. They're also FOA and Son clients. So my colleague in the food and beverage practice, who you know very well, Sal Fazzolari, who oversees these accounts, he ran with putting this very special surprise together. So let's cut, if we could, to that special surprise now.
Hi, Michael and Melissa. Salvatore Fazzolari here. Melissa, as you know, we proudly work with you and your team at Siddhi to deliver on all levels for our mutual food and beverage clients. Since working with you, I have been totally impressed with your work ethic and your passion for what you do. And I know these feelings are shared by those brands who work with you. Today, I am excited to share messages from two clients that work with Siddhi and FOA in partnership. They both have special messages for you, Melissa. First up, we have Greg Siewitz. Greg is the co-founder of Magic Spoon, the healthy cereal that tastes too good to be true. High protein, low sugar, keto-friendly, and gluten-free. Magic Spoon cereal tastes just like your childhood, but it's entirely adult. So without further ado, here's what Greg has to say to Melissa.
Hey, I'm Greg, the founder of Magic Spoon. We make high-protein, low-carb versions of all of your favorite classic breakfast cereals. And I just wanted to thank you, Melissa, for being along this journey with us the whole way. I remember sitting at that coffee shop with you in Park Slope, pitching you the idea before we had anything, a product or brand, I think, or supply chain or any sales at all. And you were so supportive, immediately wanted to be on board. And I've learned a lot from you about how to be both practical and assertive with suppliers and co-mans, and I think it's a delicate balance where, being an entrepreneur, ultimately no specific given term is worth blowing up a deal over. And from my perspective, you really get that, which is unusual for a lot of people in operations. And it's been fun to have you on board. Can't wait to keep building with you and scaling Magic Spoon together.
Our second message comes from Gregory Struck, the CEO of Noops, which makes organic, gluten-free, dairy-free, plant-based oat milk pudding made from gluten-free oats, sunflower seeds, cocoa, and dates. Take it away, Gregory.
Oftentimes, when starting a company and looking at innovation and bringing something to market that has never been done before, entrepreneurs are faced with an extreme challenge in terms of finding co-men and finding packers and finding really a team that can dive deep into creating a product that would work, that's never been done before. Noops is first of its kind, plant-based organic oat milk pudding. And we're so excited to have the guidance and leadership of Melissa and the City Ops team. They've been instrumental in everything we've done from the minute this business was conceived. They're truly partners in every sense of the way and critical thinkers. Melissa, I'm really excited to have this opportunity to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all that you have done for myself, for the company, and to move us forward. I know without a doubt we would not be here or even close to where we are if it wasn't for your help and your hand-holding, your friendship, your leadership, and everything that you've been to myself and the company on multiple levels. This is for you, and really excited to be able to share Noops oat milk pudding with the world. And thank you, Melissa, and thank you, Siddhi, for all you've done.
Melissa, I hope you enjoyed these well-deserved messages.
So good, man. So good. That was touching.
They both really wanted to do this. I think Greg from Noops is like a good heart. There's something about that guy.
Yeah, good human being.
All right.
They both are.
Absolutely. Both of them are. This is all not being, we love you both. All right. So Melissa, I hope you enjoyed that. I know that you put your heart into everything, and there's probably nothing better than a heartfelt thank you from the people that you work with. So we hope you enjoyed that. And
pretty awesome.
And to continue for the viewers, I would ask that everyone stay tuned for the live Q&A that's going to follow this pre-recorded discussion. 2 lucky viewers are going to be the recipients of some Noops product and some Magic Spoon product. So
nice.
we're really excited about getting that out to someone to try. These are 2 powerhouse emerging food brands, so we're excited about that. And just to make it very clear, we got thank yous from 2 Gregs. If you are interested in working with Melissa and City Ops, there is not a prerequisite to have the first name Greg. They are open to they are open to working with people of all different first names. We just landed on 2 Gregs. So Melissa, I just want to thank you so much for all that you do. I want to thank you for being on today's show. It was really awesome, and you really provided so much wonderful information to the audience. Thank you.
No, for sure. Thank you. And thanks for your partnership.
Thanks to all for joining us here on Food for Thought. A huge thank you to my guests, Melissa Facchina and the team at City Ops. And to Greg Seawitz of Magic Spoon and Greg Struck of Noops, thank you so much for all that you did to make this episode a little more special for our guests and for our viewers. To continue the conversation on co-manufacturing risk management solutions, please reach out to me by phone or email. I look forward to hearing from you. And finally, thank you to all of our FOA and Son valued clients for allowing us to serve your risk management and insurance needs. It's our honor to play a role in your food and beverage journey and your success. I'll see you next time on Food for Thought. Melissa, Greg brought up this little coffee shop in Brooklyn. I think that's the same place you and I met for the first time. It's a popular coffee shop for you, I take it.
Listen, that probably should never have come out because so many people who know me are going to watch that and be like, wow, Melissa makes me come to that same coffee shop. And so I think there are hundreds of those, but none of you knew it at the time. Now that got out, I no longer live in Park Slope, Brooklyn, so I don't have to worry about meeting in that coffee shop anymore.
I thought I was special, but I guess not.
You were special because you got an in-person.
I love that.
I was all virtual way before COVID existed.
That's right. Absolutely. Okay. So I know we had some questions that came in, and, like a very good, participant here, Melissa, I think you were answering some of those in the chat toolbox there. I don't know if the viewers are able to see the responses. I don't know all the technicalities behind this, but let's go ahead and Patty, if you could just kind of jump in and maybe ask some of those questions out loud here, so we can answer those live and get those answers back to the audience. That'd be great.
Absolutely. So Melissa and Michael, one of the first questions is, as a brand, when you're dealing with a co-manufacturer, what's the top risk that I should try to contractually transfer back to the co-manufacturer?
I think my answer to that was raw material purchasing and recall. Those to me seem like the two greatest risks. There's a lot of cost associated with procuring your own raw materials. There's also a lot of control. But oftentimes, if a product comes in bad, that's your responsibility, right? If a product goes through a processing and comes out bad and they blame it on the raw material and the raw material was your responsibility to purchase, that's now your, liability. I actually don't know if you can transition recall to the co-man. We try, but I don't know if that ever holds up. Michael, you should probably weigh in on that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I totally agree with you. I think the raw material purchasing, if you can put that into the hands of the co-manufacturer, number one, they may have a little more leverage in getting that material. And yes, they take on the responsibilities. Right now, if it's an imported raw material, you have foreign supplier verification programs in place. An emerging brand may not have, the team right away to be able to tackle all of those things from a regulatory perspective. So to be able to put that into the hands of a co-manufacturer to secure those goods, that would be ideal. Now, keep in mind, as a brand, you want to make sure that your co-manufacturer has the ability to bring in safe raw materials, and I think, Melissa, that's where you can help any of your clients in overseeing those, those procedures that are in place to make sure that those procedures are adequate. And as far as transferring the recall responsibility, sometimes what you see is a co-manufacturer who will produce the entire finished good, and then they will sell the finished good to the brand, right? So instead of the co-manufacturer just getting a fee for processing, they can actually bring the finished good to completion and then sell the finished product. And when you look at insurance policies, specifically contamination recall insurance, one of the triggers of that coverage is that it triggers for products that you, the insured, sell. So if a co-manufacturer is selling that finished good, they would be able to secure a contamination recall policy that would take care of those financial exposures. So yes, everything tied around inventory procurement, recall, especially recall, because it's all hands on deck when there is a recall. And a lot of these emerging brands just don't have the manpower to take care of that. So to have the backing of a co-manufacturer in that regard would be very, very helpful for sure.
Ready for the next question? So Alexander is with us today. Hi, see you on social media quite a bit. So he's asking, with the advent of plant-based products on the rise, astronomically on the rise, would you say that the manufacturing process for co-packers has become more or less difficult with plant-based products?
That's all you, Melissa.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so first, shout out to Alex. I've known Alex for a while. really great marketer in a space from Brand First. Look, I think the very short answer is it's much more difficult for plant-based products in particular. Why? Because there's no dedicated co-manufacturing support yet. There's no facilities out there that are saying we're only making plant-based products. I mean, I guess none is an understatement. I think I know of one, sincerely. Then there are facilities who say, sure, we'll add a line in and we'll make plant-based products on that line, but we're also not going to be known for plant-based product production solely. And there are various levels of capacities in these places. And so small brands have to solve for that problem themselves. I actually see one of my partners here in the attendee list, Mr. Lee Cooper, who owns a brand called Barbecue, and he's got to build out a facility. Why? Because he's making plant-based meat and he doesn't have a choice to go somewhere. Now, he may want to control his own process anyway and make back-end infrastructure. But if we had the choice, it may be more cost-effective to go externally. Today, it's not. And so those are challenges that both co-men are facing and figuring out how to solve for. And primarily brands and investors have to figure out how to pony up dollars for that.
So Melissa, you're seeing these brands needing to invest CapEx dollars into processing equipment that may then be in the possession of a co-manufacturer.
Oh yeah, we put down about $55 million of CapEx equipment in the last 4.5 years, specifically for plant-based products.
Right.
And sometimes you're purchasing just one small piece of it, right? They may have all this line infrastructure, but can't slice your stuff the right way or shred it the right way or blend it the right way. So you're just buying a piece, but it could be a $300,000, a $500,000, $1 million piece when you're starting a business. And now you've got dollars on the floor of the co-man. Now you've got, well, what happens when the employees of the co-man run your piece of equipment and hurt themselves? Who's responsible? What happens if they default on a loan? Does the bank come in and say that piece of equipment's on this floor, and so that actually belongs to us and not you? I mean, there's so many other things now you have to look out for when you're putting dollars on the floor of a co-man.
Sure, and it's very important to look at that from a risk perspective and making sure you have the right insurance in place, but also making sure you have those right co-manufacturing agreements.
Yeah, for sure.
Patty, you have another question there?
I do. And so, someone's asking for Sal to kind of address, it's kind of a two-part question about coverages, right? So what are you looking for coverage with your co-manufacturer, and what coverages should you have in place?
So just to be clear, what coverages you should have in place? You mean as a brand? As a brand.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So Sal, first of all, thank you for all that you did to get Greg and Greg to participate. Much appreciated.
Hey man, thanks so much.
Seamless. And I was so happy to be here. And Melissa's just incredible and great information.
Absolutely. So what are your thoughts, Sal, as far as, brand focus, you're a brand, what are the typical insurance coverages that an emerging brand should focus on? As Melissa, you said this during our conversation, sometimes you have to make the decision to not put certain coverages in place, understanding the risk, but then layer that coverage in at the right time. So Sal, what's the process that you would bring? And you work with a lot of emerging food brands here at the Foe & Son Food and Beverage Practice. So, you're perfectly positioned to answer this.
Thank you. And I have. And I think the way Melissa described it is spot on. So we talk about a risk management wall, right? There are different pieces. Our first priority is what you need to actually operate your business, right? So there will be some insurances, your general liability, your workers' compensation, that just to open the doors, let's say, and just to start selling product, you will need to have in place. Very often they may not be what is in, the owner's opinion, his most critical exposure. But the reality is those have to be our first pieces, because we can't get to the next steps unless you're selling your product, unless we're generating revenue.
All right. So Sal, to jump in there, a lot of these brands are faced when they're trying to sell their product into, let's say, a supermarket, chain, or to a distributor who sells to supermarket chains. Those customers will, at a minimum, want product liability insurance. So even if you as the brand say, hey, I'm creating a very safe product, no one's going to claim bodily injury by consuming my product, it doesn't really matter because that is the basic coverage that you need to make that sale.
That's exactly right. So, and again, I think specific, each scenario can have its own variables. But what I've been seeing on the front lines is general liability and workers' comp is sort of the bare minimum of, yes, we'll have this discussion. And to your point, I've seen limit requests that are, in my opinion, extravagant for a new business. There will be co-mans and there will be people that our clients want to work with, that Melissa's clients want to work with, that throw some astronomical numbers out there as far as the limits go. Also, to Melissa's point, I think we then phase in. There is a reality to spend. Everyone has margins. So to have a Melissa pick and choose what potentially we can deal with this exposure, or we can't. So the trajectory I see general liability and workers' comp right up front. I then see us evolving into potentially product recall and contamination. Very often we're having cyber discussions while this is going on, and inventory. As soon as the smaller brands get bigger, there's a major inventory exposure. It's their biggest property exposure problem.
Yeah, and I would say in the food and beverage business, it's the number one cause of loss to food and beverage companies. Something happening to their inventory, whether raw materials or finished goods, in transit or in storage facilities.
Yeah.
So it's a key element that we look at for our clients. And it may not be something that you insure right off the bat, but you have to layer it at some point.
Exactly.
Well, actually, let me call that part out. I think that's actually a piece of contention in terms of estimating cost. And people get sticker shock with what it costs to insure that. And so, yeah, when you're moving a couple $100,000 of product a year, I probably wouldn't get it, to be honest with you. I probably wouldn't spend the dollars because the likelihood that you're going to have to pull something back and what you can get back from that is probably not going to mitigate the cost. It's not going to, the cost isn't going to mitigate itself extensively. But when you're talking about selling 15, 20, 50, $100 million plus of product, and you're paying, I don't know, tens of thousands of dollars for coverage, there's a huge difference in you've got, one whole run that's lost. That might be $2 million worth of inventory. Or God forbid a warehouse burns down. And so, I think those are places I know that I'm supposed to have coverage in my brands for inventory. And I also know that I won't do it until they reach a certain point, because the dollar on the balance sheet becomes more important in the beginning. And then literally once it hits a certain revenue marker, we push really hard for that. That becomes very important for us because it can wipe out, huge operating dollars of a company. And then you're going back to raise capital in brands that are not profitable. You're going back to raise expensive capital dollars, equity dollars, just to make sure your business can keep moving. And so you build a budget in it. And that's where I think, it's important to lean into people like you guys, because you have an idea of what those budgets look like. You can build them in for the future. Then you automatically know 36 months from now, I'm going to have an insurance bill that looks like this. And that's okay, because I know I'm buying safety.
Yeah. And Melissa, one thing that anyone listening to this chat today, they need to recognize is if you're dealing with any type of temperature sensitive raw material or finished good, that, when we're talking about inventory losses in the food and beverage business, the number one cause of loss to inventory is change of temperature, right? So, and it can happen so easily. And a lot of brands, they believe, hey, my product is in the possession of a third party at all times. It's at the possession of a third party co-manufacturer. It's in the possession of a third party trucker. It's in the possession of a third party warehouse. Therefore, I don't need to worry about it. They're going to take care of it. But the truth of the matter is what those entities have is liability coverage. And that will only trigger if those entities are negligent in the handling of your goods. And you would have to prove, as the brand, you would have to prove negligence. So if you have your goods in a third-party warehouse and there's a tornado that rips the roof off, and you have the cold air escape that building and your goods then spoil because of it, that's considered an act of God, not negligence. So you would have no recovery from the third party, and it would fall squarely on the shoulders of the brand. So a very important topic, and Sal, thanks for your input on this. So Patty, I'm not looking at the questions. Any other questions?
We have 2 more questions.
Okay.
And thanks for everybody for sticking around because we do have some fun raffle prizes coming up. So Lee is asking, do brokers, distributors, retailers assume any of the risk, or is the liability always driven back to the brand?
So I think it all depends on the contract, right? So like Melissa said, if you have a co-manufacturer who's procuring those raw materials, they may have some more responsibility when it comes to the, whether or not those goods are adulterated to begin with. And if something were to happen, they would have more skin in the game. But I think in looking at these risks, you need to start with the concept that insurance doesn't exist, right? You don't have the safety net of insurance. Start with that concept. How would you as the brand successfully manage your risk? At that point, you need to bring in contracts, right? You need to use someone like Melissa and her ops team, an attorney, to work out the contracts that shifts as much of that risk back on other parties. Now, dealing with like I mentioned, third-party warehouses, storage facilities, they have typical contracts where they're liable for 50 cents per pound of product. And that's only if they're negligent, right? So you have to weigh those things very carefully. Melissa, do you have anything you want to add on that front?
Look, I think, per Lee's question, Lee doesn't use co-mans. So he's looking down the supply chain line beyond that, right? Which is retail partners or distribution partners. And I think that leverage is important. I think small batch brands have a real challenge shifting that liability across their whole supply chain. Whether they use co-mans, whether they use brokers, whether they use distribution partners, they basically get handed a contract and get told, take it or leave it. Sure, you may be able to have, a few small nuances. If your lawyer is really good or people have connections on the other side, you can get a little bit of work done. But it's not until you're really driving, your value to your third-party support partner in whatever support mechanism we're talking about. That's what's going to drive decisions for them. So if you're not bringing them revenue, if you're not delivering real dollars to them, you sit on the bottom of the food chain, right? And so in that case, the brand has to say, I'm fairly certain I'm not going to get maneuvering here. I can try, but fairly certain I'm not going to get it. So then how do I protect myself? And then you start layering on protecting, your business with insurance, in my mind. As the brand grows and you have now leverage, you think somebody's going to push back on Beyond Meat when Beyond Meat wants, something in a distribution contract? No, because that contract's worth a lot of money. Yeah. And so then you start to make these navigations. It's this shimmying kind of all the way down the line of like, I'm going to push this over a little bit. This will reduce some of this exposure. Maybe I can reduce my insurance cap down a little bit, reduces my premium over here because I pushed some of this onto this partner, but I still know I have this exposure here. I think it's, it's constantly an evaluation of how your brand evolves and what parties you bring to the table. And more importantly, for me, I just always want to know what the deal is. So even if I know that I'm not going to get anywhere on a negotiation, I need my legal team to tell me what exactly I'm signing up for so that I can see exactly what the gaps are and then be able to make, mature decisions to fill in for those gaps.
Yeah. And to Lee's question, looking down the supply chain, as you move your product down the supply, to your customers, you'll have customers who will say, hey, we want you to sign a hold harmless agreement, which pretty much you're giving away the farm. You're taking on any and all financial damages, even when your customer that you're selling these goods to is negligent. And that's something to be very careful of. You want some type of contractual language in those agreements that at least puts your customer or parties down the supply chain on the hook if they are negligent for a situation that would cause some type of loss. So you got to be very careful about those hold harmless agreements. I've also seen agreements where a customer will say, when we take possession of your goods and they are now in our possession, you, the brand, are going to continue to cover those goods for physical loss or damage while they're in our possession. That is almost impossible to do from an insurance standpoint. So if you sign that contract, you are in a self-insured situation in many cases. And that's where having open dialogue with your operations team, with your legal team, and with your insurance team makes all the sense in the world.
Look, I'll tell you, there are many times where we'll turn around and say, I mean, frankly, you and the legal team we use almost exclusively know each other very well. But in the context of that doesn't happen, there are times where we've said, take a look at this agreement, look at the language. What am I missing? Where's the gap here so that we know what we're trying to solve for? And lean into your team, right? I mean, let's be honest, you guys are nice and front and center and faces of the business right here, but you've got an awesome back end. And people in your organization who really fight for the clients that you bring into your infrastructure.
We appreciate that. We do fight for our clients. Thank you. Patty, how about one more question, and then we'll get to the prizes, the raffle prizes?
We just had another question that's a little bit building on that about food safety audits, like the GFSI and GMP. How are those used to make insurance decisions, and do these certificates have value? And I just wanted to let you know, Alex had another follow-up question that I missed earlier. So we got about 8 minutes. If you can squeeze one more question from Alex, I think he might appreciate that.
Yeah, let me quickly answer the Alex question, which was, are there different contaminants that happen in plant-based products than in animal products? And the answer is, yeah, there's different ones, right? There's different bacteria that live inside plant, matter versus animal matter. And you've got generally a cold chain that you're managing when you're talking about animal products. And a lot of times plant-based proteins, at least in a raw material stage, have been, powdered or dry. But there are definitely different contaminants. But if you take it a step up and say, if we're just talking about bacterial contamination and the effects of it, it's really the same thing. You're just mitigating risk for different types of contaminants down the line. And there are different governing bodies, the FDA versus the USDA, that manage that.
Yeah, another key thing on that point, Melissa, too, is when you're looking at plant-based products, and let's think about like a veggie burger, right? If that's being produced by a co-manufacturer, in many cases, it's par cooked, right? It's not cooked all the way through. So what you're finding is that you have the potential for listeria. We'll use one pathogen as an example. You have the potential for listeria in a processing facility or in a raw material that's being introduced into that finished good. You have a co-manufacturer who's par cooking it. So it's not getting it to the appropriate temperature to qualify as a kill step for listeria. And then that product is moving into the stream of commerce. With many brands with the mindset of, hey, the consumer's going to cook this anyway at home, so therefore wouldn't that qualify as the kill step? We wouldn't have to recall the product. That is not the case. FDA does not recognize consumers cooking that product or following cooking instructions adequately. They don't consider that a kill step. So if you can't verify through your process that you are heating that product to a certain temperature, if listeria is found in your plant and there's a reasonable probability, which is part of FSMA's FDA mandatory recall authority language, you would be faced with having to recall that product. So yeah, I do see, that plant-based companies, they really need to look at this very carefully, especially with a lot of the products that are going into the market being ready-to-eat products, where you're getting more nutrient-dense foods too, right? Not this heavy cooking or high heat processing. So definitely something to look at and be very careful of.
Yeah, let me go into the safety audit. And actually, Michael's probably better served to answer the question than me. I'll tell you how I look at it. Arguably, GFSI is the best governing body globally, right? They've got SQF, they've got BRC, which are probably two of the most well-known, food safety programs that exist here or in Europe or in Asia. It gives me some relief when a co-man is operating at that level and has that type of certificate. But look, I was an SQF auditor for a few years. And I'll tell you, there's varying degrees of auditors out there, and there's varying degrees of plants. And you sort of downshift your expectation based on the plant. It's very funny. You can go into a plant that's very small batch, not state of the art, and they get an 88 as a grade. And then you can go into a state-of-the-art facility that's squeaky clean. You'd eat anything off the floor all day long, and they still have an 88. And it's like, wait, how's that possible? You're judging them against a code and what they're capable of doing inside that outfit. And so, yes, they have to have food safety plans to get there. They have to have HACCP plans fundamentally to get there. But it doesn't mean, all these businesses are run by people. And so it doesn't mean that there's no, I think, human risk in accident, but two, I don't know. I guess I don't give perfect award to because you've got an SQF or a certificate from a GFSI governing body that I feel totally safe and that I don't have to insure my brand. I feel good about you being a partner. And it makes me interested more in understanding if you give me a HACCP certificate that I think you have a full HACCP plan. I don't have to be so stressed out about asking for every nuance of it. But I really look at protecting your business as your responsibility, no matter who you're using. And so I probably answered that in a bunch of circles and didn't get anywhere other than to say.
Let me touch quickly on the insurance piece. Insurance underwriters, I would say for the most part, they don't know all the details that go into GFSI, SQF. They just know the concept of third-party audits, right? So when Sal or I or other members of our food and beverage team, when we're putting together a submission, right, for new insurance for an emerging brand, that underwriter will come back with key questions on how the brand is monitoring the safety of the food products that they're going to sell. And a lot of the questions that we bring to the brand owners, they say to us, this doesn't apply to us. We use co-manufacturers. The underwriters want to see that the brand owners are taking ownership of food safety, even if they're offloading the processing responsibilities to a third party, right? So for brand owners to understand the food safety, the HACCP plans that are in place, the recall plans that may be in place for your co-packers, these are all important things. And Melissa, I know you spend a lot of time with your clients in working with co-manufacturers to say, hey, we need to see your food safety plans. Show us what you have in place. Show us your recall plan. If something were to happen, do you go through mock recall drills? Are you ready to hop on this very quickly? So that kind of information is very helpful from the insurance perspective of getting underwriters who may not be interested in a risk to get them interested, right? Because the brand is doing everything that they possibly can from a food safety standpoint.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much. That we've answered everyone's questions, and I've shaken the virtual hat over here and picked a couple of winners.
You need a drum.
So the lucky winners one person will be receiving a shipment of Noops and one from Magic Spoon. So I believe they've logged off, but Andrew Ward is our first winner. And Ari Raz is our second winner. So congrats, and we will be in touch to get your email, your physical address to ship your gifts.
Awesome. Well, congratulations. It was Andrew and Ari, right? Congratulations to you both. Yes. Melissa, you're the best. Thank you so much for everything and all the information that you've provided. So valuable.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thanks for the hard work, guys.
You're very welcome.
Bye.
Bye.
Everyone. Thank you.